The auction house fell silent when Severin Malkova raised his paddle. Not because of the bid itself, $2.3 million for a Caravaggio sketch was unremarkable in rooms where wealth competed for validation. The silence came from recognition, from the ripple of awareness that passed through the crowd like wind through wheat, bending bodies slightly away, adjusting postures, recalibrating the invisible mathematics of who mattered and who merely attended. Severin didn't notice. Or rather, he'd stopped noticing decades ago, the same way one stops hearing a clock that's always ticking. The auctioneer's voice cracked slightly on the confirmation. Sold to paddle 47. His eyes didn't meet Severin's. Nobody's did, unless they were very foolish or very desperate. Champagne circulated through the reception hall afterward, carried by servers whose training included recognizing faces that required extra deference. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across silk gowns and tailored suits. The November evening pressed against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, a reminder that empires existed both inside and outside this room. Severin stood near the east wall, close enough to the emergency exit to satisfy instincts that never fully rested, far enough from the main crowd to discourage casual approach. His charcoal suit cost more than most people's cars, but he wore it like armor rather than advertisement. At 44, his face had settled into angles that suggested decisions made and consequences accepted. Silver touched his temples premature, though the woman who'd first noticed was long dead and her opinions no longer reached him. A server approached with trembling hands, offering a glass he didn't want. He took it anyway. Refusing created conversations. Accepting created nothing but a prop to hold while he waited for the evening to end. The crowd maintained its careful choreography around him. Conversations happened in clusters that orbited his position, like planets around a sun they couldn't approach directly. He caught fragments, merger discussions, gallery openings, someone's daughter's wedding in Tuscany, the background noise of people whose problems existed only in the narrow bandwidth of abundance. That's when the commotion started near the entrance. A security guard's voice rose above the ambient murmur, professionally firm but carrying an edge of confusion. "Miss, you can't, this is a private event. Where are your parents?" Severin's attention shifted with the precision of a predator registering movement in peripheral vision. The crowd parted slightly, creating a sightline to the source of disruption. A child, perhaps 6 years old, though something in her bearing suggested age beyond her slight figure. She wore a yellow cardigan buttoned wrong third button through second hole over a white dress that had been washed too many times, the fabric holding ghost impressions of flowers that had faded into memory. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that someone had attempted with care but limited skill, loose strands framing a face that didn't belong in this room full of careful faces. She wasn't crying. That was the first thing Severin noticed. Children who wandered into wrong places usually cried, or at least showed fear. This girl's expression held something else entirely, a stillness that came from having already survived things worth crying about. The security guard reached for her arm, his grip professional but firm. She twisted away with a fluidity that spoke of practice, of knowing exactly how adult hands moved and how to exist in the spaces they couldn't reach. "I'm not lost." Her voice carried across the reception hall, small but clear, cutting through the champagne murmur like a blade through silk. "I know exactly where I am." The crowd had stopped pretending not to watch. Conversations suspended mid-sentence. A woman near the bar clutched her pearls with theatrical concern. A man in a burgundy tie pulled out his phone, perhaps to document the disruption. But the girl wasn't looking at any of them. She was looking at Severin. Their eyes met across 30 feet of marble floor and frozen aristocracy, and something in his chest recognized something in hers. It was the look of someone who had run out of options and chosen the most dangerous one remaining. The look of someone who understood that safety and danger sometimes wore the same face. She moved. Not running. Running would have triggered intervention. She walked with purpose, weaving between evening gowns and startled expressions, her worn sneakers making no sound against floors that had known only designer heels. The security guard followed, reaching, but she was smaller and faster and driven by something he couldn't understand. The crowd parted for her without realizing they were doing it. Some primal recognition that this child carried weight that had nothing to do with size. 20 feet. Severin didn't move. Didn't signal his own security, two men positioned at cardinal points who had already begun calculating interception angles. He raised one finger, almost imperceptibly. Stand down. 15 feet. A woman gasped as the girl passed close enough to brush her Hermes clutch. Someone whispered something about calling the police, about vagrant children, about what was happening to this neighborhood. 10 feet. The girl's eyes never left his. Brown eyes that had learned to measure threat before learning cursive. Eyes that had weighed him from across the room and decided correctly or not that he was the answer to a question she'd been asking for longer than anyone her age should have to ask anything. 5 feet. Severin's security detail tensed. The auction house staff converged. The moment balanced on a knife's edge between intervention and something else entirely. She reached him. And before anyone could stop her, before protocol or propriety could be restored, her small hand shot out and grabbed his. The touch was electric. Not metaphorically, literally. Static discharge from her shuffling journey across the carpet. But beneath that spark was something else. Fingers cold as cemetery stone, grip tight as desperation, holding on to him like he was a life raft in an ocean that had been drowning her for years. The room held its breath. Severin Malkova, whose name made judges nervous and made prosecutors lose files, whose empire stretched from legitimate commerce to shadows that never saw subpoenas, looked down at a child who had just done what grown men feared to attempt. She tugged his hand, pulling him down toward her level. He could have resisted, could have signaled for removal, could have done any of the things that a man in his position should do when a stranger's child breached every protocol of power and distance. Instead, he bent. His face came close to hers, close enough to see the faint bruise yellowing beneath her left eye, close enough to smell the cheap detergent that couldn't quite mask the scent of a home where something had gone wrong. Her lips moved against his ear, breath warm and trembling despite the steel in her grip. "Please," she whispered. "Help." 2 words, 7 letters, the weight of a world collapsing. Severin straightened slowly, the child's hand still clutching his. The room remained frozen, a tableau of silk and shock, waiting for the response that would define how this story was remembered. His face revealed nothing, but something behind his eyes shifted a door opening to a room he'd locked decades ago, when he was small and desperate and had no one's hand to grab. The silence stretched into its 4th second, which was 3 seconds longer than most people had ever seen. Severin Malkova allowed a situation to remain unresolved. His senior security officer, Dmitri, had already begun moving not toward the child, but toward a position that would allow clean extraction if the situation required it. 14 years of service had taught him to read his employer's silences, and this one sang with frequencies he'd never heard before. The auction house manager materialized from wherever management hid during moments of crisis, his smile a masterwork of professional panic. "Mr. Malkova, I am so terribly sorry. I don't know how she's security protocols are usually. We'll have this resolved immediately." He reached for the girl's shoulder. "Don't." The word came from Severin, soft as snowfall, heavy as granite. The manager's hand stopped midair as if it had struck an invisible wall. "Sir?" I said don't touch her. The manager retreated 2 steps, his professional smile curdling into something closer to fear. He'd heard stories about Severin Malkova. Everyone in Chicago had heard stories. The legitimate ones involved hostile takeovers that left competitors bankrupt. The other ones whispered in courthouse hallways and police precinct parking. Lots involved different kinds of hostility entirely. Severin looked down at the child, still gripping his hand. Her knuckles had gone white with the effort of holding on, as if she expected him to disappear like every other solid thing in her life. "What's your name?" The question was quiet enough that only she could hear. Around them, the auction crowd had begun manufacturing their own narratives, a relative's child, obviously. A charity case he was handling personally, something medical, perhaps. "Mira." Her voice came out steady. "Mira Vance." "Mira." He repeated it like he was learning a new language. "Who told you to find me?" "Nobody." Her chin lifted slightly, defensive pride surfacing through the desperation. "I figured it out myself. You're Severin Malkova. Everyone's scared of you. I saw your picture in the newspaper at the library when I was looking up powerful people who might be able to stop him." The honesty was surgical. No manipulation, no rehearsed story, just the raw logic of a child who had exhausted every other option. Severin studied her face with the same intensity he brought to negotiations where millions hung on micro-expressions. The fading bruise beneath her eye was perhaps a week old, transitioning from purple to yellow-green in the way bruises did when they weren't the first of their kind. Her cardigan's wrong-button state suggested she'd dressed herself quickly, possibly in the dark. The braid showed effort but not expertise, a child doing her own hair because the adult who should have been doing it was absent or incapable. "Everyone's scared of me," he repeated. "But you're not. I don't have room left to be scared of you." The answer came immediately, as if she'd already calculated this conversation in advance. "I'm too full up with being scared of him." Around them, the auction house staff had begun the delicate work of resuming normalcy. Conversations restarted with artificial brightness. A server navigated the crowd with a fresh tray of champagne. The string quartet in the corner picked up a piece they'd abandoned mid-phrase. But nobody came within 10 feet of where Severin Malkova stood holding hands with a 6-year-old girl in a faded dress. Dmitri. Severin's voice didn't rise, but his security chief appeared instantly at his shoulder. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the evening. Have the car brought around. Side entrance. Sir, the Castellano meeting. Reschedule it." The words carried finality that closed further discussion. Dmitri nodded and stepped away, phone already pressed to his ear. Severin looked back down at Mira. "I'm going to walk you out of here. When we get to my car, you're going to tell me everything. Not some things, not the easy things, everything. Can you do that?" She nodded, her grip finally loosening slightly, not releasing, but no longer clutching with the desperation of someone afraid the lifeline would be pulled away. "What happens after I tell you? That depends on what you tell me." He straightened, keeping her hand in his, and began walking toward the side exit. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea before Moses, though in this case the divine power being respected was considerably darker. A woman in diamonds leaned toward her husband and whispered something about how touching it was, how he must have a soft side nobody knew about. Her husband, who knew better, said nothing at all. The car was a black Mercedes that whispered money rather than shouting it. Tinted windows turned the city into shadows. Leather seats that had probably cost more than Mira's apartment building exhaled softly as she settled into them, her slight figure swallowed by luxury designed for larger bodies. Severin sat across from her in the rear-facing seat, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid crowding. The partition between them and the driver was raised. Dmitri rode in a separate vehicle close enough to respond, far enough to provide privacy. The car pulled away from the auction house, merging into Chicago's evening traffic with the seamless efficiency of a vehicle that rarely encountered obstacles. Mira's eyes moved constantly, cataloging details the way children who'd learned to assess environments for danger always did. Exit points, lock mechanisms, the distance between herself and the man who had, against all probability, not yet let her down. "You said everything," Severin reminded her. His voice was different now that they were alone, still controlled, but with edges that had been filed down for public consumption now exposed. "Start from wherever makes sense." Mira's hands worked against each other in the only nervous gesture she allowed herself. She reached into the pocket of her yellow cardigan and withdrew something, then extended her arm across the space between them. In her palm sat a small collection of objects, 2 crumpled dollar bills that had been smoothed and folded with obsessive care, a handful of coins totaling perhaps $3 more, and a delicate silver chain with a tiny pendant, a hummingbird with one missing wing. "This is all I have," she said. "I know it's not enough. I know you probably spend this much on car freshener or something, but it's everything I've got, and I'll give you more when I'm older. I'll work and pay you back whatever you want." Severin didn't look at the offering. He looked at her. "What do you think you're buying?" "Protection." The word came out like she'd been practicing it. "My mom works nights at the distribution center on Ashland, 12-hour shifts. While she's gone, her boyfriend stays with me. Except staying with me isn't what he does." She paused, and in that pause lived entire worlds of things a 6-year-old should never have to understand. "His name is Wade. He moved in 8 months ago when we couldn't make rent alone. Mom says he helps. He does help with money, I mean. But when she leaves, Mira's voice dropped, carrying the weight of Leinefend. Something too heavy for small words. He helps himself to other things. The car's silence was absolute. Climate control hummed at frequencies below conscious hearing. Outside, Chicago's lights slid past like witnesses who couldn't be called to testify. Severin's expression hadn't changed, but something in the quality of his stillness had shifted. He'd become very, very still. The kind of still that predators became before they moved. What kind of other things? He drinks first. Always. There's a cabinet above the refrigerator where he keeps bottles Mom doesn't know about. I know because I count them when he's asleep. When he's had 4, he gets mean. When he's had 6, he gets... She stopped, her vocabulary reaching its limit for describing adult horrors. Different. He looks at me different. Talks different. Comes to my room and sits on my bed and tells me I'm going to be pretty like my mom someday, and shouldn't I be nicer to someone who pays for the roof over my head. The silver hummingbird with its broken wing caught light from passing street lamps, flashing like a distress signal. Has he hurt you? Physically? Mira's hand moved unconsciously to her fading bruise. He grabbed my face last week. Said I was looking at him wrong. Said if I ever told anyone about our special talks, he'd make sure Mom lost her job and we'd be on the street. Her jaw tightened with anger that had nowhere safe to go. He said nobody would believe a kid anyway. That I was a liar like my dad, whoever that was. She thrust the money and necklace toward him again, more insistently this time. The hummingbird was my grandma's. She died last year, before Wade came. It's the only thing I have that's worth anything real. The wing broke when I was hiding under my bed last week, and I landed on it wrong. Her voice cracked for the first time, not from the memory of hiding, but from the damage to her inheritance. I'm sorry it's broken, but you can probably fix it. Rich people can fix anything. Severin looked at the broken hummingbird, at the crumpled dollars that represented a child's entire net worth, at the small hand extending them with a formality that suggested she understood transactions even if she didn't understand why they were necessary. The offering sat between them like a question waiting for an answer. Put it away. His voice was quiet, but something in it made Mira's hand tremble. It's not enough, she said, her composure finally cracking at the edges. I knew it wouldn't be enough, but I don't have anything else. I could work. I'm good at cleaning. I'm quiet and I don't eat much and I could... Mira. He said her name with a gentleness that surprised them both. Put it away. I don't want your grandmother's necklace. I don't want your money. That's not how this works. Confusion clouded her face, the particular confusion of a child who'd learned that everything cost something, that nothing came free, that adults always wanted payment even when they pretended otherwise. Then how does it work? Severin leaned forward slightly, bringing himself closer to her eye level. The city's lights painted shadows across his face, revealing and concealing in alternating rhythm. You walked into a room full of people who would sell their own mothers for the right business connection. You crossed 30 feet of floor that grown men are afraid to approach me on. You grabbed my hand in front of 200 witnesses who will be talking about nothing else for months. He paused, letting the weight of her actions settle between them. You've already paid, Mira. More than you understand. Courage is the only currency that actually matters, and you just spent more of it than most people accumulate in a lifetime. She stared at him, the money and necklace still extended but forgotten now. So you'll help? You'll make Wade go away? Tell me more first. I need to understand the full picture before I can know what kind of help is required. Mira withdrew her hand slowly, tucking her grandmother's hummingbird back into her pocket with careful reverence. The money followed, smoothed and folded with the same obsessive precision. She took a breath, the kind that preceded jumping off diving boards or walking into auction houses where you didn't belong. What else do you want to know? Everything, Severin repeated. Where you live, what your mother knows, how long you've been planning this, why you chose tonight, chose me, chose this particular act of impossible bravery. The car continued through Chicago's arteries, carrying them toward answers that neither of them was fully prepared for. The car had circled the same 6 blocks 3 times now. Severin had given no destination, and the driver knew better than to ask. Some conversations required movement without arrival, the illusion of going somewhere while staying suspended in the space between questions and answers. Mira talked. Not in the rushed, desperate way children usually confessed secrets, but with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this testimony in the dark, whispering it to ceiling cracks and closet walls until every word was polished smooth. He wasn't bad at first. She stared out the window, her reflection ghosting against the city lights. When he moved in, he brought groceries. Real ones, not just ramen and bread. Mom smiled more. She stopped crying in the shower when she thought I couldn't hear. She traced a finger along the window's edge, drawing invisible maps. Wade called me kiddo and taught me how to play chess. He said I was smart, smarter than most adults he knew. I believed him. A pause. I wanted to believe someone who wasn't Mom thought I was worth something. Severin listened without interrupting, his body angled toward her, but his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond the car's interior. A technique he'd learned for making witnesses feel observed without feeling watched. Month 2, he started staying up later, waiting for Mom to leave. He'd sit in the kitchen in the dark, and I'd hear the cabinet open and close. Open and close. Her finger stopped its tracing. I started counting. The bottles. The sounds. The minutes between when she left and when his footsteps started down the hall. Where does your mother think you are right now? Sleep over at Brinley's house. She's in my class. Her parents are divorced and her mom won't let her dad visit, so Brinley sneaks out sometimes to see him. We cover for each other. She said it matter-of-factly, without judgment, except Brinley doesn't sneak out to find criminals. The pragmatic alliance of children navigating adult failures. Severin filed the information away. You said Wade comes to your room, sits on your bed. What else? Mira's shoulders tightened, her body contracting around a core she was protecting. He talks about how pretty I'm getting, about how I should be grateful, about what happens to little girls who don't appreciate the men who provide for them. Her voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. He smells like the bottles, like something chemical and sweet and wrong. I breathe through my mouth so I don't have to smell it, but then I can almost taste it, and that's worse. She shuddered, a full-body tremor that came and went like a wave. He touches my hair, pulls it out of my braid and says it's softer than my mother's, that I should wear it down more often. He touches my face, my neck. Her hand moved to her throat, fingers pressing against skin as if checking for bruises that hadn't formed yet. He says he's teaching me things, preparing me, that I should be thankful someone's taking the time. The car's climate control hummed its indifferent song. Outside, Chicago lived its Friday night life, couples walking to restaurants, groups spilling out of bars, 1,000 ordinary evenings happening within feet of a conversation about extraordinary horror. Has he touched you anywhere else? The question hung in the air, necessary and terrible. Mira shook her head slowly. Not yet, but I can feel it coming. The way he looks at me changed last month. Hungry, that's the word. He looks at me like I'm something he's been waiting to eat, and he's almost done being patient. She turned from the window then, meeting Severin's eyes with a directness that belied her age. I'm not stupid. I read things online at the library. I know what comes next. I know what men like him do to girls like me. And I know that if I wait until it happens, no one will believe me because there won't be proof. And even if there was proof, Mom would lose Wade's money and we'd be homeless and she'd look at me different. Her voice cracked but didn't break. She'd look at me like I ruined everything, like I should have just stayed quiet. Who told you that's what you're supposed to do? Nobody had to tell me. I watch. I see how people treat my mom at work, how men talk to her at the bus stop. I see what happens when girls speak up. She laughed, a small, bitter sound that had no business coming from a 6-year-old throat. They get called liars. They get asked what they were wearing. So I decided to do something before there was anything to lie about. Severin had built his empire on reading people, on understanding the architecture of their fears and desires. He had seen men beg and women scheme and politicians crumble. But this child, this 6-year-old girl with her broken hummingbird and her crumpled dollars and her matter-of-fact description of approaching destruction, she had disassembled him with nothing but honesty. What about your mother? His voice came out rougher than intended. Does she see any of this? Mira's expression shifted into something complicated, love and resentment and protection all braided together. She's tired. All the time. 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. She comes home and Wade has made breakfast, and she looks at him like he saved her, like she can finally breathe. Mira's fingers knotted in her lap. I tried to tell her once, month 3. I said Wade made me uncomfortable, that I didn't like being alone with him. She said I was jealous, that I needed to adjust to having a man in the house, that I should be grateful someone wanted to take care of us. She didn't believe you. She didn't hear me. The distinction was important. There's a difference. Believing means you listened and decided someone's lying. Not hearing means their voice doesn't make it through whatever wall you've built to survive. Mom's wall is made of bills and exhaustion and wanting so badly for something to work out that she can't afford to notice when it isn't. The observation was surgical in its precision, devastating in its compassion. Does Wade know you're aware? That you understand what he's doing? He thinks I'm stupid because I'm young. He thinks his threats are working, that I'm scared silent. A flash of something fierce crossed her face, not quite anger, but its precursor. He's half right. I am scared. But I'm not silent. I'm just quiet until I find someone scary enough to be loud for me. She looked at Severin with those brown eyes. Are you scary enough? The question wasn't a challenge. It was an interview. She was still assessing whether she'd made the right choice, whether this particular monster was the kind that fought other monsters. Severin held her gaze. Yes. The single syllable carried weight that made the air in the car feel thicker. It was a promise and a warning and a confession all at once. Mira nodded slowly, accepting the answer like a contract being signed. Good, she said, because he's getting braver. Last week, he came to my room after his 6th bottle and just stood there, watching me pretend to sleep. 23 minutes. I counted every second. He was deciding something. I could feel it. She paused. He decided to wait, but I don't think he'll wait much longer. The car had finally stopped, circling. They were parked now on a quiet street in Lincoln Park, bare November trees reaching toward a sky that the city's light pollution had turned into permanent amber twilight. The engine idled, a soft mechanical heartbeat. Severin processed what he'd heard, running the information through frameworks built for different kinds of problems. Supply chains, territory disputes, the complex mathematics of power. But those frameworks kept collapsing under the weight of a child's testimony, under the image of a 6-year-old counting seconds while a predator stood in her doorway. I'm going to ask you something, he said finally. And I need the truth, even if the truth is complicated. Mira straightened slightly, recognizing the shift in his tone. Okay. If I make Wade disappear from your life, and I don't mean hurt him, I mean remove him, completely and permanently, what happens to you and your mother? Can you survive without his money? The question surprised her. She'd expected action, not economics. She paused, thinking with the furrow-browed concentration of someone unused to being consulted about logistics. Mom got a raise last month, 50 cents an hour. She cried about it, happy crying. We were behind on rent before Wade, but not impossible behind, just scary behind. Do you know how much Wade contributes? He pays half the rent and buys groceries. Maybe $400 a month, I think. I found an envelope once with cash in it. He caught me looking, and that's when he grabbed my face. Her hand moved to the fading bruise again. He said it was his money, and I should remember that everything in my life existed because he allowed it to. Severin absorbed this. $400. The price of a child's safety. The leverage a predator used to buy access to his victim. It was less than what he'd spent on wine at the auction house reception. The asymmetry was obscene. Here's what's going to happen. His voice shifted into something more formal, the tone he used when establishing terms that weren't negotiable. You're going to go back to your sleepover. Tomorrow, you'll go home like normal. For the next several days, nothing in your life will change. Do you understand? Mira's face fell. But you said... I said I would help. I didn't say help was instant. What you've described requires careful handling. Not because Wade deserves care, but because you and your mother do. If I act rashly, there are consequences you can't predict. Questions get asked. Sometimes the cure creates new diseases. She stared at him, disappointment warring with pragmatism. So I just go back? Keep counting bottles and seconds and pretending to sleep while he watches me? For a few more days. Yes. He leaned forward, his voice softening. I know what I'm asking. I know how impossible it sounds to return to a situation you were brave enough to escape. But I need time to construct a solution that protects you completely. Not just from Wade, but from everything that comes after. What comes after? Questions. Investigations. A mother who has to reckon with what she failed to see. I need to be precise. A scalpel, not a hammer. Mira considered this with an intensity that reminded him she was not a typical child. You're saying you need to cut only what needs to be cut. The metaphor surprised him. Where did you learn that? Mom watches surgery shows when she can't sleep. I watch with her sometimes, under a blanket, so she doesn't know I'm awake. A small, sad smile. Surgeons talk about precision a lot. Then you understand. I understand. She didn't sound happy about it. But if he decides not to wait anymore, if he comes to my room and closes the door, then the scalpel didn't work fast enough. And I'll be the table that got destroyed. The words hit Severin like a physical blow. I will not let that happen. How can you promise that? You're not there. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a phone. Not his primary device, but something smaller, simpler. A prepaid model with only one number programmed into it. Take this. He placed it in her hands. There's one contact saved. It will reach me or someone who can reach me within 30 seconds, at any hour. If Wade touches you, if he moves toward your room, if anything happens that makes you feel unsafe, you call. You don't hesitate. You don't second guess. You call. Mira looked at the phone like it was a holy object, a talisman against darkness. What happens when I call? Someone arrives. Someone who will ensure Wade never touches you again. The implication beneath the words was clear. Mira didn't flinch from it. Will they hurt him? Severin considered lying, considered softening the truth. But she had earned honesty. If necessary. Yes. Mira nodded, sliding the phone into her cardigan pocket alongside her grandmother's broken hummingbird and her crumpled dollars. I have a question, she said. Ask. Why are you doing this? I mean, really, you're a stranger. I interrupted your fancy party and grabbed your hand and made everyone stare. You could have had me thrown out. You're powerful enough that my problems probably look like nothing from where you sit. She tilted her head, studying him. So why? The car's engine hummed. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed toward a different emergency. Severin looked at this child who had been brave enough to find him, smart enough to assess him, and honest enough to demand answers she deserved. Because I was you once. The words came out before he could stop them. From a place he'd locked away so thoroughly he'd almost forgotten it existed. Not exactly. Different city, different monster, different details. But the same essential architecture. A mother who worked too hard to see what was happening. A man who smelled like poison and looked at me like I was something to be used. A closet where I learned to make myself small and silent and invisible. Mira's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with recognition. The terrible kinship of survivors. What happened to your monster? He died. Severin's voice was flat, emptied of emotion by years of practice. Eventually. Not as soon as I needed him to. Not before he taught me lessons I've spent my entire adult life trying to unlearn. Did you? No. I was too young. He died of his own poison in the end. But by then, I'd already become something else. Something that understood how power worked and what to do with it. He gestured vaguely at the car's interior. This, everything you see, everything you've heard about me exists because a boy in a closet promised himself that he would never be powerless again. That if he ever had the chance to protect someone the way no one protected him, he would take it. Mira absorbed this confession with the solemnity it deserved. So I'm your chance. You're one of them. Maybe not the first, but you had the courage to ask, which is more than most people ever manage. She reached out and took his hand again, not grabbing this time, but holding. A gesture of solidarity between two people who understood the same darkness. Thank you, she said quietly, for hearing me. Even if you can't help yet, just being heard is more than I had an hour ago. The car dropped Mira at the corner of Brinley's block. far enough to avoid notice, but close enough that she'd only have to walk past a few streetlights before reaching safety. Severin watched her small figure move through the amber-lit darkness, her yellow cardigan a spot of color that refused to be swallowed by the night. She didn't look back. That meant something trust, perhaps, or the pragmatic forward focus of someone who couldn't afford to second-guess. When she disappeared around the corner, he exhaled a long, slow release of breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since her fingers first wrapped around his. "Back to the residence," he told the driver. Then, reconsidering, "No, take me to the lake." The car parked at Montrose Point, where Lake Michigan stretched into darkness the city lights couldn't quite reach. Severin stepped into November cold, his breath forming clouds that vanished instantly. The lake churned against rocks with a rhythm that predated human concerns. Mira's face kept appearing in his mind. The bruise, the broken hummingbird, the composure of someone who'd learned to survive by predicting disaster. But beneath her image, older memories stirred. His mother's name had been Katya. She'd worked 2 jobs in Brooklyn, when Brooklyn was still a place where immigrants scraped for survival. During the day, she cleaned office buildings in Manhattan. At night, she waited tables at a Russian restaurant in Brighton Beach. Between those jobs, she slept, or tried to. Yuri had arrived when Severin was 4, introduced as a friend who needed a place to stay. A few weeks became months, then years, anchored by rent contributions and the illusion of partnership Katya desperately needed. Severin remembered liking Yuri at first. The man brought chocolate and taught him card games and called him Little Warrior in Russian. He remembered wanting to impress him, wanting a father figure. The memory curdled as quickly as it surfaced, because Yuri had also brought bottles, clear liquid he kept in the freezer, claiming it was medicine. He drank it when Katya was at the restaurant, building momentum until his eyes took on a glaze that young Severin learned to recognize as danger. The first time Yuri hit him, Severin was 5. He'd asked too many questions about why Yuri's hands were shaking. The answer came in a backhand that sent him sprawling across the kitchen floor. He'd lain there, cheek pressed against linoleum, understanding for the first time that love and violence could coexist in the same body. Katya never knew. She saw bruises and accepted explanations about playground accidents. Severin learned to hide. The coat closet became his sanctuary, dark and cramped but defensible. He'd sit among winter jackets that smelled like his mother's perfume, listening to Yuri stumble through rooms, calling his name in a voice that promised pain. He remembered counting. Seconds, minutes, bottles. He developed systems for tracking consumption, predicting dangerous thresholds. 3 drinks meant irritation, 5 meant volatility, 7 meant the closet, no matter what. The lake's waves crashed against rock, pulling Severin back to the present. Yuri had died 30 years ago, liver failure at 41. A death too slow to feel like justice, but the damage was already done. The boy who emerged from that childhood was not the boy who'd entered it. Something had been removed: innocence, trust, the ability to believe in safety. Something else had been installed: hypervigilance, strategic thinking, a capacity for violence that could be directed rather than endured. He'd built his empire on that foundation, transforming trauma into territory. And now a different child had found him. A girl with her own closet, her own counting system. She'd recognized him. Survivor to survivor. He pulled out his phone. "It's me. I need comprehensive surveillance on an address in Garfield Park. A man named Wade. I want everything: history, patterns, weaknesses. There's a child in that apartment, and the clock is running out on her safety. Timeline? Fast. Faster than fast." By Monday morning, Severin's people had assembled a portrait of Wade Elmore Pritchard that read like a roadmap to predation. The file sat on his desk overlooking the Chicago River, 43 pages that transformed a monster into data points. Wade was 41, born in Decatur, Illinois. Parents dead. No siblings, no marriages, no children claimed. Employment history: sporadic and downward, trending. Construction in his 20s, warehouse work in his 30s, temp jobs that never became permanent. Currently unemployed 14 months, living off Jolene Vance's income. The criminal record was instructive in what it didn't contain. No convictions. But the pattern beneath told a different story. 3 women had filed restraining orders over 15 years. All 3 later withdrew. One had a daughter who would now be 19. Severin's people were still locating her. 2 landlords had evicted Wade for lease violations that translated to complaints about shouting, about a child's crying that went on too long and stopped too suddenly. None of it was proof. All of it was pattern. The surveillance section documented Wade's behavior over the weekend. Saturday, 11:52 p.m. Subject observed standing in doorway of Mira's room for 19 minutes. No entry. Returns to couch and loses consciousness by 12:30 a.m. 19 minutes. Standing in a child's doorway. Watching. The profile estimated Wade was in late-stage preparation for abuse. The doorway watching, the comments about appearance, the escalating boldness all indicated a predator approaching the moment fantasy would become action. Severin closed the file and composed a text to Mira's phone. Working on it. You are not forgotten. Stay strong. The response came faster than expected. I'm okay. He only had 3 last night. Thank you for remembering. 3. Below threshold. 1 night of safety purchased by moderate restraint. He put the phone away and returned to his desk, where the machinery of Wade's removal waited to be set in motion. The solution came together over 4 days with the precision of a surgical operation. First incision, financial. Through untraceable transactions, Severin established a trust fund in Mira's name, administered by a legitimate nonprofit for children of single working parents. Monthly payments would cover the gap Wade currently filled, plus enough extra to suggest the universe was finally delivering deserved fortune. Jolene would receive notification through official channels, a letter explaining that her daughter qualified through school records, that no application was necessary, that support was unconditional. Second incision, geographical. Wade had a cousin in Montana named Dale, a man he'd lost touch with but occasionally mentioned when drunk. Dale ran a ranch outside Billings, successful enough to need workers, remote enough to appeal to men who needed fresh starts. Dale didn't know it yet, but he was about to receive a call recommending Wade for a position. The recommendation would be glowing, the timing urgent, the offer generous. The plan's beauty was its appeal to Wade's psychology. A legitimate job through forgotten connections would validate his narrative. He wasn't a predator fleeing, he was a man finally getting the break he deserved. The call happened Wednesday. By Thursday, Dale agreed. Wade overheard a bar conversation about the opportunity Friday night, 2 men on Severin's payroll expressing skepticism that a city guy could handle ranch work. Wade, 3 drinks in, inserted himself with aggressive friendliness. By that night, he had contact information and a story about hustling his way into something those losers thought was above him. Saturday, he was packing. Severin monitored updates tracking Wade's psychology. The man was excited not about leaving Mira and Jolene, but about proving everyone wrong. Sunday morning, final confirmation arrived. Subject departed 7:42 a.m. Personal vehicle heading northwest toward I-90. GPS tracker active. Severin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, then moved to the next phase. Removal was complete. Now came reconstruction. The trust fund notification sent it tomorrow, and the promotion opportunity at her workplace should reach her supervisor by end of week. Promotion? She's been there 4 years with perfect evaluations. There's an assistant manager position opening. Jolene Vance will be the obvious internal candidate. How do we ensure she gets it? The center's parent company has contracts with my legitimate operations. A suggestion about promoting reliable internal talent will carry weight. The machinery was in motion. The silence was the first thing Mira noticed. She woke Sunday morning to an apartment that felt different, though she couldn't immediately identify why. The quality of air had changed. A pressure she'd stopped noticing had suddenly released. No television murmur from the living room, no heavy breathing from the couch, no sounds of a man existing in space that should have been hers. Only her mother's soft movements in the kitchen, and beneath that, something she couldn't remember hearing in this apartment. Actual silence. She checked everywhere. The couch. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. Her mother's bedroom, where Wade's clothes should have been gaps in the closet. Absences where his things had lived. He's gone. Jolene stood in the kitchen doorway, coffee cup in both hands. Some job in Montana. Left this morning. She held up a note, words scrawled on paper, information presented as accomplished fact. When is he coming back? I don't know. Might be a while. Might be permanent. They ate breakfast without rushing. Jolene made pancakes shaped like stars, something she hadn't had energy for in months. Mira ate slowly, committing the taste of peace to memory. Later, from the park near Brinley's building, she texted the phone Severin had given her. He's gone. This morning. Was it you? The response came within minutes. Yes. He won't be back. You're safe now. Safe. Such a small word for such an enormous concept. Thank you. You did this. You had the courage to ask. I just had the resources to answer. The weeks brought changes that arrived like gentle rain after drought. The trust fund letter came 3 days after Wade's departure. Jolene read it at the kitchen table, confusion giving way to hope. Some kind of scholarship program, monthly support payments. She calculated, recalculated. It's enough, Mira. We're going to be okay. 2 weeks later, Jolene came home glowing about a blast promotion opportunity assistant manager, better hours, better pay. Christmas arrived with actual presents under an actual tree. They ate dinner together, just the two of them, and Mira realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this sensation. It took her a moment to identify it. Happiness. Jolene started noticing the pattern in February. Gift cards arriving without return addresses. Anonymous donations funding Mira's art supplies. Someone paying parking tickets before she knew she had them. Someone was helping them. Systematically. Invisibly. With resources that suggested serious money and serious reach. She thought about Wade's sudden departure, the job that appeared from nowhere, the cousin he'd barely mentioned, the timing that aligned perfectly with a future she'd been too exhausted to hope for. One evening, she sat on Mira's bed while her daughter finished homework. Those weeks before Wade left, you were different, calmer, like you knew something would change. She chose words carefully. Did something happen? The silence stretched between them. I asked for help, Mira said finally, from someone who could actually give it. Who? Someone powerful. Someone who listens to kids when no one else does. Her jaw set with stubbornness. I'm not sorry I asked. Jolene felt the words like physical blows. What do you mean made Wade go away? The job was arranged. Someone wanted him gone, so someone made him gone. Mira's voice carried no guilt. He was hurting me, Mom. Not hitting, but other things. Things that were getting worse. I knew if I waited until it got bad enough for people to believe me, it would be too late. Baby, why didn't you tell me? I tried once. Month 3. You said I was jealous. Jolene's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. You didn't fail. Mira moved beside her mother. You survived. You kept us housed and fed. I just found someone who had more. This person who helped, is he dangerous? Yes. Mira didn't hesitate. But not to us. Never to us. He's a monster, Mom. But he's our monster. Jolene thought about the black sedan she'd noticed near their building. About kindnesses arriving without explanation. If he contacts you again, I want to know. No more secrets. No more secrets. They hugged in lamplight, 2 survivors of different shipwrecks finding the same shore. The invitation arrived in May cream-colored envelope. No return address. Private reception. Lincoln Park Conservatory. Sunday, 3 p.m. A car will arrive at 2:30. Do you think it's him? Jolene asked. Yes. He wants to meet you, to see that we're okay. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather. The car delivered them to the conservatory, where Severin waited in the palm room beneath reaching fronds. He turned as they entered, his expression softening when he saw Mira. You look well. I am well. Because of you. Because of you, he corrected. I just helped with logistics. Jolene had stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with a mother's assessment. Miss Vance, thank you for coming. When a car shows up with that kind of invitation, refusal feels unwise. You always have choice. He gestured toward seats arranged near the windows. I thought it was time we spoke openly. They sat Mira beside her mother, Severin across from them at eye level rather than above. A deliberate choice. You know who I am, what I do. Your daughter told you some of it. He addressed Jolene directly. I want you to hear it from me. I am not a safe man. But your daughter came asking for help, and I gave it because I was once a child who needed help and received none. She told me about your past. Then you understand my motivation isn't charity. It's the chance to be for someone else what I wished someone had been for me. He paused. The assistance comes with no strings. You're free to walk away and continue receiving support as if we'd never spoken. And if I don't walk away? The question surprised both of them. Then we continue with transparency. You'll know who's helping and why. We'll exist as something like... He hesitated. Family seems too strong. Friends too weak. Alliance, Mira offered. We help each other. Severin's expression flickered with something that might have been emotion. What could you possibly help me with? Mira studied him. You're lonely. You have people who work for you and people scared of you, but nobody who just likes you. For who you are, not what you can do. She tilted her head. We could like you, if you let us. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he smiled a real smile that transformed his features. You're remarkable. He extended his hand toward Jolene. Alliance? She looked at his hand, then at her daughter, then at this dangerous man who had saved them. She took his hand. Alliance. 3 years passed. Mira was 10 now, tall for her age and carrying herself with confidence. She excelled in art, played basketball in a youth league, and had announced intentions to become either a lawyer or veterinarian, whichever helped more people. Jolene had risen to regional manager, her salary comfortable enough that trust fund payments went directly to Mira's college savings. She'd started dating again carefully, and recently met a man who looked at her like she was worth seeing. And Severin had become something none of them expected, a constant. He attended Mira's basketball games, sitting in back rows where his security could maintain sight lines. He sent birthday gifts that showed he'd been listening art supplies when she mentioned watercolors, books about strong women who changed history. On the anniversary of their conservatory meeting, Severin invited them to the lakefront, the same shore where he'd stood years ago, processing his encounter with a desperate child. They walked along the water's edge, Mira running ahead to investigate rocks while Jolene and Severin followed at a slower pace. She's happy, Severin observed. We both are. Because of you. Because of her. She found me. They walked in comfortable silence. That night at the auction, Jolene asked, when she grabbed your hand, what did you feel? Severin considered. Terror. Not of her, but of what she represented. She was asking me to care about something outside myself. He paused. I'd convinced myself isolation was strength. She showed me I'd been confusing safety with survival. Mira came running back, clutching a smooth black stone. Look what I found. It's shaped like a heart. Severin examined it with serious attention. What will you do with it? Keep it forever. She looked up at him. It's a reminder. Of what? Of today. Of us. Of how sometimes scary things and safe things are the same, and you don't know which until you're brave enough to reach out and grab them. From her pocket, she pulled the silver hummingbird on its chain, the wing still broken, but polished now, cared for. Like Grandma's necklace, broken but still worth keeping. She took his hand, not grabbing this time, but holding, the way she might hold anyone's hand who she loved. They turned from the water, walking together toward city lights emerging against the darkening sky. Mira walked between them, holding Severin's hand on one side and reaching for her mother's on the other, linking them into a chain that looked like a family. Maybe it was. Maybe family wasn't about blood, but about choosing each other, over and over. Maybe a monster could become a guardian, if the right child was brave enough to ask. Thank you, Mira said, for hearing me when I asked. Thank you, Severin replied, for being brave enough to ask. They walked toward dinner, toward ordinary life, toward whatever came next. Together. Thank you for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. Your support means everything, and helps me continue bringing you these stories. Until next time, remember that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help even from the most unexpected places.